Hello and welcome everyone to my discussion for Module 3 and welcome to my exotic filming location at work. This week we're going to talk about the classical theories in organizational communication when it comes to workers, and it's been good for workers to finally get a little love from the management, so let's talk about it. Discuss the similarities and differences between scientific management, bureaucratic theory, and Weber's perspectives on authority. So the previous view of the industrial organization, this was mid-18th century, was humans as machinery to carry out production. And the progression from there was to classical theories discussed in Chapter 3. They share in common that they still don't register the benefit of feedback from subordinate workers, that they have really nothing to offer except their energy and muscle and obedience, I guess. The scientific management, or Taylorism. This is on page 111 of the text, about Frederick Taylor in 1913, who had a new 20th century understanding of the modern organization of the time. Instead of apprenticeships or craftsmen, where one guy knew everything and did it by hand, he believed production could be broken down to specific time and motion tasks to optimize efficiency and to simplify the training needed. So he could get any guy to do each of the specific tasks that were studied with a stopwatch, made sure that no unnecessary steps were taken or everything was gotten down to a very precise, repetitive task. He fundamentally assumed that workers were lazy also, and that it was necessary to continually apply pressure to keep up productivity. Communication in this model was more like mechanical maintenance and issuing orders instead of taking any feedback. And jumping ahead to the video, we'll talk about, there was the quote, "There was a limited use for imagination." I like that. All right, now the bureaucracy theory. In the section, page 113, this perspective on OrgComm focuses on the organization itself rather than the activities within. Max Weber encountered some of the unethical leaders of the time and thought it would be more effective to focus on order, consistency, reason, and reliability. This is on 114. This led to key characteristics such as specialization, division of labor, formal policy, and a chain of command, or an org chart. Formal communications, job descriptions or borders around different realms of authority, and an impersonal environment. Keeping everything businesslike and no room for people to take liberties. I can imagine that would have protected against the autocratic barons at the turn of the 20th century, such as Rockefeller and Carnegie. Weber also had a revolutionary idea about authority itself for the time. Rather than passing down through nepotism or the lineage of father to son, passing on who is the CEO or the leader of the company, leadership would be based on things like, I know this is a really bold idea, but charisma, expertise, popularity, and actual merit. And this is shown on table 3.1. He believed that bureaucratic authority was best because it was based on set objectives and criteria, therefore the most fair and effective. Next, what are the strengths and weaknesses of human relations and human resources approaches to management? And how are they similar or different? Have you ever experienced this yourself in the workplace? And how can this help you better frame your understanding of the two perspectives? Now, to the credit of human relations and human resources theory, it was the first acknowledgement that subordinates are fellow human beings capable of caring about the goals rather than just fearing punishment. And they have a lot to contribute as allies and collaborators. So talking about this on page 120, it suggests it was a knee-jerk reaction to Taylorism, which was solely task-oriented. I remember in the last class we talked about striking a balance between being task-oriented and people-oriented. So you do need to make sure your processes are efficient and make sure people are doing their job, but you also need to reach out and get to know them as people, ask for their feedback, ask if there's anything that you can do to help improve their environment. But we're not there yet. We're still talking about the time when we were more task-oriented. To my understanding, human relations was also about appeasing workers. But still, it's like applying oil to a rusty crankshaft and still taking a stance of keeping enemies on tolerant terms. So the manager still feels like he's tending to people who complain, and he's keeping them barely as allies rather than really bringing them in and making them part of the real team. Human relations actually seeks out feedback, involves team members in decision making and actually putting them into action. And now on table 3.2, it gives a comparison across the two theories. Now, regarding my own experiences, I remember a job as kind of a middle manager. I had a team of about 15 beneath me, and I had a couple of levels above me. And so I don't think anyone from upper management, that means 1 or 2 positions above me, ever checked with me on what we should be doing to accomplish the top level goals, or even, mid-level, what I was supposed to accomplish. If they were to tell me about the strategy of the company, the big things they're working on, they'd probably have to bring me in, fill me in on a lot of details about what was going on, the challenges they were facing, as well as the opportunities they were looking at. Instead, where I was, they were just handing down to me, these are the metrics you'll meet. These are the things that you have to achieve. They even put them in the form of KPIs, or key performance indicators. You have to hit these targets. And all they did was give me those numbers and give me pressure to get them done. And if I was not producing, not coming back, they would just tell me to put more pressure on. They didn't ask why or what I thought we could do differently. They just wanted the results. Now in my current job, different place, I'm actually in a unique position. I'm like a remote envoy or a representative for this team that operates out of Tacoma. They are giving me better insight into what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, but they're also giving me a lot of autonomy on how to get it done. They're not really putting pressure on me to get metrics done. They're just checking in to make sure that I'm still in line with their goals, and they're also checking with me on ideas for how they can do what they do, but they have a lot to teach me. They're a lot more experienced at what they do, so I'm more looking at how I can accomplish what I need to do here, follow kind of the best practices they're doing over there. But amazingly, they still check with me once in a while to see if I have any ideas of how they could streamline their process, or get some of the repetitive tasks and automate it a little bit more. So they're still open to new ideas. They're still kind of checking with me, even though I'm the new guy. And that's nice. Next, discuss motivational theories, and what are they? How do they work? What can you take away from it? And so on. All right. Motivation theories deal with what it is to enable people to seek out their better quality of life and to achieve more. The book mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs on page 130, and that it relates to how we have a basic level of physiological needs at the baseline that we need to meet before we can think about higher needs. Those physiological needs we take for granted, most of us, but they're things like food, water, sleep. Whether we get sick, can stay healthy, and then if we can get stable on that stuff, then we can think about pursuing higher things. Things like security, and that's another thing that most of us take for granted, that we don't have dangerous things happening around us, that we live in a fairly safe neighborhood, but not everyone in the world is safe, is free to think about higher things. They're concerned more with food and security. But if you're fortunate and you've get stable on those, you can worry about higher things, and it leads all the way up to things like feeling like you've got friends, like you're needed, that you're appreciated, and it leads all the way up to the top level of this pyramid, which is self-actualization, which is where you really come into yourself and your potential, find your true calling, pursue your highest goals. And so as we're finding our way in life, we're naturally trying to seek higher levels of of reaching that goal of self-actualization. We may not realize it, but that's what we're really aiming for, according to Maslow. And next is Hertzberg, who talks about motivation hygiene theory, and this is on page 132, talking about just having good motivating factors such as more pay, promotion, autonomy. These in and of themselves don't make for a good job or a good job environment. They are positive factors, but he pointed out they're actually what he called hygiene factors, things that even though you may have good factors, you may give people raises, if you've got these other factors in place, they're going to still deter, or they're going to form an obstacle. They're going to slow down, impede your team unity, productivity, buy-in to the goals. And so he mentioned a few things like micromanagement, a boss who's a jerk, basically, or a toxic leadership environment. Things like people not following through with their promises, or they're just plain not honest about what they expect from you. And so I can remember, so I want to point out I had a breakthrough when I was reading about motivation hygiene, because I realized I've encountered this before. Before I knew this definition, I think I already learned my lesson about this. I just didn't know what it was called at the time. But I had a job before where I actually had a pretty good salary. I had a good environment, it seemed like, but after not too long, I realized the actual nature of the work was pretty monotonous. I was trying to do really good work, but it seemed like it was falling on deaf ears, like people would just ignore it. I'd turn in a report and they'd just throw it onto a pile and never read it. And I just came to the realization that it was a dead end, that I hated it, even though it was the best I'd ever been paid and benefits were good and, good stable job, so they say, but I just wasn't feeling it. And so I started looking for a different job, started doing something else. So the good thing is now I can recognize these hygiene factors such as micromanagement and such, and I know I have a better idea of what's important in a job. And I learned that I'm perfectly happy taking a job that pays less or whatever, isn't as glamorous, but as long as I enjoy it and it's a good environment, and those hygiene factors are cleared away, that I'm going to be a lot better. All right, now let's talk about this video, which I thought was pretty great. Does its age impact the overall information? I thought the video was a great supplement to what we read in the book. I appreciate that someone in recent memory, that's going back 20 years, but it's not that long ago, right? Sorry for those of you who are barely 20 years old, but it did give a pretty fresh perspective on the workplace and communication. And it talks about our transition from assembly line energy and muscle, where humans are just there as machinery. All they're providing is, moving parts around and repetitively doing a task and following procedures exactly. We transition to creators of creativity and ideas in the information age. And information age is a term that was established in the 1990s. Originally, I would say the big change was, instead of assembly line factor jobs and whatnot, we started to have businesses based on e-commerce or websites or buying things online. This is in contrast, or the term was actually brought up then, but the term brick and mortar, instead of having a physical store, you could have a lot more business online where people don't actually have to come to your store and buy stuff. They can browse online and put in their credit card and get it shipped to you directly. That's still a pretty accurate description of what most of our economy is based on today. And I'd say it's transitioned a little bit more. The idea of information age is not just websites anymore or e-commerce, but it's actually, as the video put it, that people are essential to coming up with innovative ideas, more thinking, more creative work. Instead of trying to think of ways to make assembly lines work faster, we're coming up with new ideas, new products. and it's less brick and mortar and less energy and muscle than before. So it's more engaging to team members. People are more involved in coming up with ideas for the products and ideas of how to implement that, making decisions, meaningful decisions, and participating in putting those into practice. So here's an idea that I wonder about next, with this idea about transitioning from pre-industrial, industrial, assembly line, to up to information age. So what is it going to look like in the post information age economy that is surely on its way? And I wonder if post-information economy will revert back to assembly line efficiency, when automation and AI will do all of the energy and muscle and information work. So are humans just going to go back to serving the robots again? All right, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Sorry this went on long, but I look forward to the comments. Bye for now.